I find it almost impossible to believe I'm finally committing this to words. For 3 years, I've kept this experience locked away, a secret shared only with my sister, and even she regards me with a look of pity, as if I've finally and completely lost my grip on reality. But after discovering so many accounts online, stories of encounters with these creatures from people who sound as sane and grounded as I believe myself to be, I've decided it's time. It's time to tell my own story, to document what happened to me in the raw, beautiful and terrifying autumn of 2021. This isn't some campfire tale I picked up, not a story passed down from a friend of a friend. This happened to me, directly to me, and not a single day passes that I don't think about that creature and the time we shared. What I am about to tell you will challenge your perception of the world, but I swear on my life, every word is the unvarnished truth. I've been hiking the Cascade Mountains since I was a little girl. My family owned a remote, rustic cabin deep in the North Cascades, a good 10 miles from the nearest trailhead, nestled in a pocket of wilderness so profound that few people ever ventured there. It was no architectural marvel, just a simple, sturdy structure with 4 walls and a cast-iron wood stove that my grandmother, a woman of incredible grit and self-reliance, had built with her own hands back in the 70s, a time when you could still carve out a piece of the world for yourself without drowning in bureaucracy and permits. My mother used to bring me here when I was young, teaching me the language of the forest. She taught me how to read the signs left by animals, how to identify edible plants and distinguish them from their poisonous lookalikes, and most importantly, how to respect the wilderness, to understand that we were merely guests in a world far more ancient and powerful than ourselves. After my mother passed away 5 years ago, I continued the tradition, seeking solace in the silence of the mountains. I would hike up to that cabin alone at least once a month, sometimes more frequently when the oppressive weight of city life became too much to bear. The solitude I found there was a rare and precious thing, something I couldn't find anywhere else. There was no cell signal, no internet, no relentless background hum of traffic and machines. It was just me, the mountains, and my thoughts, enveloped by ancient trees and the symphony of the wild, water rushing over stones, birds calling across the vast green expanse. That September afternoon began like any other hike I had undertaken countless times before. I parked my truck at the trailhead around 1 in the afternoon, confident I had ample daylight to reach the cabin before darkness fell. The sun was a brilliant orb in a cloudless sky, the air crisp and perfect for hiking, cool enough to prevent heavy sweating, but not so cold as to require bulky layers. I was in peak physical condition from years of hiking and climbing, and I knew this particular trail intimately. I could have walked it blindfolded, recognizing every turn, every stream crossing, every distinct rock formation that marked my progress. The parking area was deserted save for my truck, a common sight for a weekday in late September. This trail was a local secret, and those who knew of it were wise enough to be wary this late in the season. The weather in the high country could turn treacherous without warning. A beautiful autumn day could become a blizzard in a matter of hours. Snow could arrive at any time now, and once it began to accumulate, the trail would become impassable until the spring thaw. I figured I had another few weeks before I'd need to winterize the cabin and bid it farewell until April or May. It was on that perfect day that I made a careless, almost catastrophic mistake. About 4 miles in, I stopped to rest at a rocky outcrop that offered a spectacular panoramic view, and I stayed there far, far too long. The vista was breathtaking that afternoon, one of those flawless fall days when the air is so crystalline you feel you can see to the edge of the world. The mountains stretched out before me in cascading layers of blue-green ridges fading into a hazy, distant purple. The changing leaves on the lower slopes blazed in patches of gold and fiery orange against the deep, stoic green of the evergreens. I sat on a sun-warmed boulder, eating my lunch, mesmerized by a hawk gliding on thermal currents high above the valley, and I completely, utterly lost track of time. When I finally glanced at my watch, a jolt of panic shot through me. I had squandered nearly 2 hours just sitting there daydreaming. The sun was already noticeably lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the landscape. I cursed my carelessness, my foolish distraction, and immediately started moving again, pushing my pace. But the damage was done. I had lost precious daylight that I could never reclaim. I pushed myself harder after that, but the trail becomes progressively more challenging the deeper you venture into the backcountry. There are treacherous sections of loose scree that demand careful footing, steep ascents that require using your hands to pull yourself up, and stretches where ancient tree roots crisscross the path like snares. In some places, the trail narrows to a thin ribbon along a high ridge, with perilous drop-offs on either side. You cannot rush through terrain like this unless you're looking to end up injured and alone, with no way to call for help. By 6 in the evening, the light was already fading beneath the dense tree canopy. The forest grows dark with an unnerving speed up there, the massive old-growth conifers acting like a thick blanket, blocking out the last remnants of the day. Long, distorted shadows stretched across the trail like grasping fingers, and a quick mental calculation told me I was still at least 2 hours. From the cabin, probably more now that I'd have to navigate in low light. That's when I had to face the inevitable. I wasn't going to make it to the cabin before complete darkness. Hiking these trails at night is a fool's errand, an open invitation to disaster. Too many routes to trip over, too many unseen drop-offs, too many ways to get seriously hurt with no one around to find you. I had done it once before, out of sheer necessity, using my headlamp to pick my way along the trail, inch by agonizing inch, and I had sworn never again. Every shadow had morphed into a threat, every sound had made me jump. A 2-hour section had taken 6, never again. So, I began scanning the woods for a suitable spot to pitch my tent for the night. I always carried full camping gear, even on these cabin trips, a basic wilderness safety rule my mother had drilled into me since childhood. The immediate area was far from ideal. The ground was uneven and rocky, carpeted in a thick layer of pine needles and decaying leaves. I needed a relatively flat patch, far enough from the trail to be out of sight, but not so far that I'd get disoriented finding my way back in the morning. My pack felt like it was loaded with bricks, and a deep-seated exhaustion was beginning to set in. That was when I heard it for the first time, a low moaning sound. Initially, I dismissed it as the wind sighing through the high branches, or perhaps a strange bird I didn't recognize. But the sound came again, louder this time, more distinct, and I froze in my tracks. My hand instinctively went to the hunting knife on my belt, my fingers wrapping tightly around the familiar grip. It was a scream, but unlike any scream I had ever heard, it was terrifyingly close to human, like someone crying out in excruciating pain or mortal fear. But woven into that human quality was something else, something wild and primal that made the hair on my arms stand on end and sent an icy chill down my spine. The sound echoed through the silent forest, ricocheting off trees and rocks before fading away. I stood there, utterly motionless, my heart hammering against my ribs. For a long moment, there was only the familiar quiet of the forest at dusk. Then the scream came again, and this time I could pinpoint its direction, off the trail to my right, down the steep wooded slope. Maybe a quarter mile away, maybe less. Distance is deceptive in the mountains, but it was close. Every instinct, honed by years in the wilderness, screamed at me to ignore it and keep moving. My grandmother used to tell stories by the fire in that very cabin, tales of things that dwelled in the high country, things that made sounds designed to lure the unwary from the safety of the path. If you ever hear something strange in these mountains, she'd say, her voice low and serious. You turn and you walk the other way. No questions, no curiosity. You just leave. I had always dismissed them as folklore, cautionary tales to keep children from wandering off, but standing there in the encroaching darkness with that terrible sound still echoing in my ears, those old stories felt chillingly real. But another, more practical voice argued in my head. I had also heard true stories of lost hikers, real accounts from search and rescue teams about people who had fallen and broken bones, trapped and helpless. This was prime black bear country. What if someone was in genuine trouble? My cell phone was useless up here. If someone was hurt, I might be their only hope for days. I couldn't live with myself if I walked away from someone who might be dying alone in the woods. After a tense internal debate, compassion won out over fear. I adjusted my pack, pulled out my flashlight, and stepped off the trail, my other hand never leaving the hilt of my knife. The terrain was brutal. I pushed through thick undergrowth, stepping over moss-covered fallen logs and ducking under low-hanging branches. After about 10 minutes of careful progress, I heard the sound again. Much closer now. It was weaker this time, more of a pained moan than a full-throated scream. That sound solidified my conviction. This wasn't a lure. It was the sound of genuine suffering. I picked up my pace, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and urgency. Through the trees ahead, I saw a small clearing, perhaps 30 feet across, ringed by colossal cedars and Douglas firs. And there, at the base of a massive cedar, something was lying in the dead leaves. My first thought was a person in a heavy fur coat. But as I crept closer, my brain struggled to process the impossible sight before me. The creature was lying on its side, one leg twisted at an angle that defied anatomy. It was clearly horribly broken. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. As I watched, it let out another of those terrible, weak moans. It was young, maybe the size of a grown woman, but its proportions were all wrong. Its arms were too long, its shoulders impossibly broad. Its entire body was covered in thick, matted, reddish-brown hair. This was no costume. The hair grew from tough, leathery skin, and its hands, curled against its chest, had long fingers and thick, dark nails that were more like claws. It was a living, breathing, and severely injured Bigfoot. My mind reeled. Everything I knew about wilderness safety told me to back away slowly. An injured animal is a dangerous animal. But this wasn't just an animal. The sounds it made, the intelligence I could sense, even from a distance. I looked up and saw freshly broken branches, 40 feet up the cedar tree. It must have fallen. I took a cautious step forward. The crunch of leaves under my boot was deafeningly loud. The creature's body tensed, and it slowly, painfully turned its head toward me. I saw its face. It was broader and flatter than a human's, somewhere between ape and man, but entirely unique. The nose was wide, the mouth partially hidden by hair, but it was the eyes that held me captive. They were dark brown, almost black, and they were filled not just with fear, but with a startling, undeniable intelligence. It was aware, assessing me, trying to comprehend what I was. I slowly crouched down, making myself smaller, less threatening, and I began to talk. I spoke in a low, calm monotone, explaining that I wasn't there to hurt it, that I saw its injury, that I wanted to help. It couldn't understand my words, but I hoped it could understand my intent. I inched closer, stopping about 5 feet away. The creature watched my every move. Then, in a gesture that shattered my world, it reached out a long-fingered hand and gently, hesitantly touched my knee. It was a plea. It was permission. It was trust. The sun had set, and the clearing was sinking into deep shadow. I propped my flashlight on a rock to illuminate the broken leg and got to work. My wilderness first aid training felt woefully inadequate, but it was all I had. The leg had to be straightened. It was going to be agony. I positioned myself at its feet, took a deep breath, and looked at its face. It was gripping the earth with its good hand, its jaw clenched. I braced myself and pulled. The creature screamed, a raw, piercing sound of pure agony that tore through the clearing. It thrashed its upper body but didn't fight me. I felt the horrifying grind of bone on bone through my hands and nearly threw up. But I kept pulling until the leg was straight. The creature went limp, mercifully passing out from the pain. Working frantically, I improvised a splint using the metal stakes from my tent, positioning them on either side of the break. I wrapped the leg tightly with every roll of elastic bandage I had, then reinforced the entire structure with nearly a full roll of duct tape. When I was finished, the leg was immobilized in a crude but effective cast. I couldn't leave it here. It needed shelter and warmth. Adrenaline fueled me as I quickly set up my three-person tent nearby. The hardest part was moving it. The creature was dead weight, easily 180 pounds of solid muscle. I dragged it inch by painful inch across the clearing and wrestled its limp body into the tent. Inside, by the light of my lantern, I could see its features more clearly. The heavy brow, the broad face, the powerful, human-like hands. Its breathing was steady. It was sleeping now, not just unconscious. I zipped my sleeping bag open to use as a blanket, covering both of us in the cramped space. The air was thick with a wild, earthy smell, but I didn't care. I needed to be there if its condition worsened. It woke up 4 times during that long, surreal night. Each time I would find its intelligent eyes on me in the darkness, full of confusion. I would speak to it in that same low, calm voice, and each time it would relax and drift back to sleep. By morning, it seemed to recognize me. I knew we couldn't stay. The cabin with its stove, bed, and better supplies was our only real chance. I explained my plan with gestures, pointing to its leg, then in the direction of the cabin. It watched me, its head tilted, and when I packed up the tent, it understood and dragged itself out onto the leaves. Then came the most physically demanding 2 hours of my life. I crouched down, and the creature, understanding, wrapped its long arms around my neck. I lifted, staggering under the immense weight, and began the journey. Every step was a battle. My back screamed, my legs burned, but I kept going, resting every few minutes. The creature held on tight, only making small sounds of pain when I stumbled. When the cabin finally came into view, I nearly wept with relief. I managed to get us inside and lowered the creature onto the bed, where it fell into an exhausted sleep almost immediately. I collapsed on the floor, every muscle in my body screaming, but we had made it. The following days settled into a strange and wonderful routine. I kept the fire going, tended to its leg, and cooked simple meals of canned soup and oatmeal. To my surprise, it learned to use a spoon with astonishing speed, its initial clumsiness quickly replaced by deft, precise movements. We developed a simple language of gestures and sounds. It was an incredibly fast learner, its mind like a sponge. On the 5th day, it tried to stand, and I rushed to help support it. For 30 seconds, it stood on its good leg, leaning on me and the wall, taller than me, its powerful frame radiating a quiet determination. Over the next week, we established a deep, unspoken friendship. I started reading my paperback novel aloud, and it would listen for hours, its eyes closed in concentration, seemingly fascinated by the rhythm of my voice. The creature's strength returned daily. I fashioned a crude crutch from a sturdy branch, and soon it was hobbling around the small cabin, its curiosity boundless. It learned how the well pump worked, how to stir eggs on the stove, how to fold blankets. It would watch me, mimicking my mannerisms, a tilt of the head, a way of sitting. It was learning not just skills, but perhaps what it meant to be with a human. After nearly a month, I knew our time together was ending. Its leg was healing, and it could walk, albeit with a limp, without the crutch. It grew restless, spending hours on the porch, staring into the deep woods that were its home. On the morning of the 33rd day, I awoke to find it standing in the clearing, testing its weight on the injured leg. It walked in a slow circle, its face tight with pain, but it was walking. It saw me watching and we shared a long, silent look. We both knew. We ate breakfast together one last time. Afterward, it walked to the door and I followed it onto the porch. It turned to me and in a gesture that brought tears to my eyes, it placed its large hand on my shoulder and squeezed gently. It was goodbye. It was thank you. It was everything. Then it turned and walked across the clearing and into the trees, disappearing into the shadows. I stayed for 2 more days, hoping it would return. The pack of food I left on the porch was gone the second morning. That was my sign. Returning to my city life was a jarring, surreal experience. How could I explain that I had spent the last month nursing a Bigfoot back to health? I had no proof, only the vivid, indelible memories. I go back to the cabin often now. I always leave food and it's always gone by my next visit. I don't see the creature every time, but there are signs, tracks too large to be human. A neatly stacked pile of firewood on my porch that I didn't cut. 3 months after it left, I saw it again. I was hiking the trail when I heard a rustle above me. It was sitting on a branch 20 feet up, looking healthy and strong. It made that low, rumbling sound of contentment I knew so well. Then it raised its hand and waved. A real human wave. I waved back, tears streaming down my face. It held my gaze for a moment longer before leaping into the canopy and vanishing. That is my story. A Bigfoot lives in the Cascade Mountains with a healed leg, one who knows how to use a fork and how to wave to a friend, and I am the woman who helped it. Sometimes, out of habit, I still set 2 plates at the table in the cabin, just in case my friend decides to come in from the cold. He never has. But I keep hoping.